Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I've been going around today in the first day of the showcase and talking to a lot of people, and what we really haven't talked a lot about is odds. And the nice thing is that when we're sitting at the blackjack table at night, we're talking to the dealer and saying, some of them are pretty easy. You say, okay, well, I've got 20, dealer's got 16, or he's got 6 showing. I keep my 20 because the odds are in my favor. And then, there's some times where we're not sure what to do. And a good example of that is when you've got 12 and the dealer's maybe showing 17 or something like that. Do you hit on the 12? And you're supposed to be consistent. It's basically a 50-50 shot. But what do you do when you're going in and maybe you have a 16 and dealer has a 10? Now, the book says you need to hit on that because we have to assume that the dealer has a 10 under. And most people who don't understand the game won't hit because they don't want to lose and they're scared of losing. But the reality is that over time, you're going to do better if you had hit than if you didn't. The reason I bring all this up is that even at blackjack, at a game that's pretty well laid out and that we're just talking about 2 cards, he's got 1 card showing, I've got 2 cards to start, and we're trying to get to 21, your ability to figure out your own odds is probably pretty terrible. And the reason why I say that is that anyone who figures out their own abilities is not only taking some objective measures, but a very significant subjective measure. And this is my concern, and the title of the podcast is why it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get some residencies. So I was talking to an RPD tonight, and he was saying, we consistently get 200 applications for our 4 spots. And you think of that as, wow, okay, so 4 out of 200, that makes 2%. Well, it's actually lower than that. When you apply and you're one of those 200, and the first person gets chosen, then it would be 199. So you're 1 out of 199, which is still less than, it's about a little over 0.5%. And then 1 out of 198, 1 out of 197, 1 out of 196, and so forth. But once you get an interview, everything changes. So once you get to the interview, and maybe there's 12 of you going in for an interview, your chances are 1 in 12, which are you're still, if you're talking about 12 interviews for maybe 4 spots, that's pretty good odds. That's a pretty good deal. But this is what I'm really concerned about, is that I keep seeing people gravitating towards popular choices rather than good matches. And there's a ridiculousness in it, in that it's like you're going to a Keith Urban show, and let's pretend Keith Urban isn't married, and you're saying, I know there's 50,000 people here, but Keith's going to pick me, we're going to be together forever. And you've got that kind of mindset. I've got to tell you that you really make your own odds. And there's a couple of ways you do this, and you can increase how you do or decrease how you do depending on how you play, just like with blackjack. So, when I have good odds, maybe I have an ace and anything really, against a 6, then I'll double down, I'll put more money in or whatever. And it's just for fun. I never play with more than, I can afford. But what I keep seeing over and over again is this kind of thought that, 50% of people get a residency. And they have this thing in their head that if I just apply to more, then I'll have a better chance. But the reality is that you have no chance. And the reason you don't have a chance is that you are applying to places where you have absolutely no ties. You have you are writing the same letter of intent to the same groups and just changing a couple of the words. And you are making it so easy for them to reject you. Okay. Something that an RPD told me tonight was, we can't go by the numbers. And there's this idea that there's this meritocracy where the person with the best score is going to score that interview. But the reality is that you have so many people that are scoring high. You have so many people that are at a certain level that once you get there, it's like, well, do we know any of them? Do we have any background on them? Do we have anybody that knows these guys? And that's where it comes in. So this is my advice for you if you've made it through the 6th minute of this episode is, look, it's not just about networking tomorrow. It's absolutely about finding out who might know someone there. Because what you're going to find is that the residency sites are going to be overwhelmed this year. Absolutely overwhelmed with applications. And the easiest way to get rid of an application is to have poor writing. And the nice thing is that thanks to the admissions process and the number of people that are getting accepted and the dearth or lack of writing, so many people are going to get thrown out on the letter of intent and that the CV doesn't measure up. And you say, well, that's crazy talk. A letter can't mean that much. I did all this stuff. Well, if the minimum to get into the residency, and these are top residencies that have this acceptance rate of less than 1%, is only 3.0, they're not looking for somebody that was the very best studier. That's not a word. But what they're looking for is a great fit. And for you to make it to that next group, you have to get there, and you have to. So when we're talking about, maybe 100 applications for a site, you're talking about maybe 40 that have a chance. 60 of them with poor letters of intent, recommendations that don't meet the criteria, CVs that just don't have enough or the right types of things, GPAs maybe that are a bit low. Those things will immediately knock out the 60. And then they've got the 40 left, which are trying to cut down to maybe around 10. And what is it that separates those 40? What is it that separates the top and the bottom? And what really separates the top and the bottom has nothing to do with you talking about yourself in a CV and the length of your CV. It is that everything in that letter of intent says, you know what, the things that you offer and the things that I want to do are the same. Okay, but I'm also doing them at a very high level. Okay, so the letter is one thing, and I get it. I'm helping people with their letter. I make a couple bucks to do it. I assure you, it is not anywhere near what I should be charging. But the other part of it is, did this person take the time to actually build a relationship with us yet? And you say, well, what are you talking about? I thought if I just had the best grades, the best recommendations, the best abilities, all that, then I'm in. Well, there's two groups. And there's the group that they already know, some of them, and they look at their, and it makes the mark. It makes that, top 40. And they're like, okay, well, we know them and they're in the top 40. Let's bring them in for an interview. And then there's the other part of the top 40, which is a much larger group, which is we don't know them, but they're the best of the other 30 or whatever it is. And maybe we'll take 15 interviews, 10 interviews, whatever it is. So your job tomorrow, your job in the two showcases is to start figuring out, okay, do I have a professor that knows somebody at this hospital? Do I have someone that I was working with in an APPE that knows the people here? Am I in Phi Delta Chi and somebody's in Phi Delta Chi that I met? Isn't someone in Kappa Psi that I know, and so forth? It is not about, everybody thinks, okay, well, I have to network because I want to get a good job. No, you have to network because the job that these residency program directors are doing is so freaking hard. Do you know how, imagine you are a residency program director and you have 200 applications. You need to put that on top of your regular work schedule, and then the residents already work schedule. There's no person that helps them sort things out and do all of that stuff. They've got to do it all on their own. Now, Farmcast helps, but I'm telling you, the easiest way to increase your odds is to start getting to know the people that are in charge. And it's not just RPDs. It's also the residents. Did you go see their poster if they were presenting at ASHP? Did you go to the social event for that state, for that college? Did you do something so that you could meet them and so that they would remember you? Look, it really isn't about talking about yourself more. It really isn't. It's about finding out what it is that is at that site and what it is that they need and what they're looking for. And if you match, and you have to have a really honest assessment of that. But I'm telling you, more people lose out on, more people that would have gotten the residency lose out because their strategy was to show off as much as they can about what they did, rather than say, you know what, it's up to me to build a relationship before I even make that application. You should have a relationship with a significant number of the sites that you're going for before you even think about applying. It is absolutely not a meritocracy because there is just not the time to do it. The way that it works, I get it. You're like, well, I've done all this work. I should be the top candidate. Great. But the problem is that there's so many people that are tied with you. And because of those ties, what breaks the tie is if they have a relationship with you, one of the residents has a relationship with you, or a professor or someone in your APPEs has a relationship with one of them and gave you an introduction. I'm not trying to tell you it's doom and gloom. I figure, when you talk about the 8,000 or 9,000 that are coming in, about half of them, 4,000, are going to get a residency. But I'm telling you that you can make that 50% a much, much higher number by making sure you apply to the places where you truly match, you truly show your energy. But this level of writing that generic, I'm writing to express my interest, or using those old letters from UCSF or ACCP. And I think a lot of people misunderstood what the ASHP letter was doing. I can't actually show it because it's behind a wall and you have to be an ASHP member. But what they're showing is garbage. Because what people are thinking is, oh, well, they put where I'm supposed to fill in a name and I'm supposed to fill in a site. That's not what they were doing. What they were doing was saying, hey, look, we don't want to put in sites to favor someone or something like that. We're just putting in, hey, this is where the site would go and things like that. But people are taking it as this kind of Mad Libs where I just fill in the blanks. And that is garbage, because I'm telling you, RPDs and residents are just looking for a reason to get rid of your application. It is absolutely the Hunger Games. It is absolutely at the top sites. What can I do to make this pile smaller? And once I can get that pile smaller, then I can get to know these people. There's a big fiction that people have that they think that when a college gets 10,000 applications, as the top schools do, that the admissions committee looks at 10,000 applications. That's simply not true. They look at a group that they're asked to look at because there's a relationship with that smaller group, and then there's just the top group. But you need to be in one of those two. Either you are the very best in the country, and then it's not really much of an issue. But there are so many of you that are going to tie, and the tiebreaker is a relationship in some way or another with someone at the site so that they can say, you know what, let's get them in for an interview and see. Okay? I don't mean to be doom and gloom. I don't mean to scare you. But I am telling you that so many of your strategies are terrible. You're going to be putting in this generic LOI. You think that asking for recommendations at the last minute, you think that by going in and that you talk to somebody at the showcase that somehow you have a relationship with them, and then you're applying to residencies that are have an acceptance rate based on the gross number of less than 1%. And if you apply to 12 of them, then somehow you do some crazy fuzzy math and say that, yeah, well, with 12, I'm definitely going to get one. Top people don't get residencies because top people sometimes can't evaluate themselves well enough to recognize that, you know what, I'm going after prestige here. I'm not going after where I would be really happy. And so my advice to you in day 2, I know it's 3 hours and 3 hours, but the advice is, look, where am I feeling like I'm building relationships and I can build relationships in this admissions process? This is the most competitive season it will ever be until maybe next year. But if you have relationships at a number of the sites that you're going to, if you can build relationships from other people that you've met in whatever you're doing at the national level, ASHP, APHA, Phi Delta Chi, Kappa Psi, whatever it is, then you're in a much better shape. So anyway, it's easier to get into Harvard than it is to get in some of these residencies. Make sure that if you're applying to the Harvard of the residencies, that you are literally a person that they could not turn down an invite to. If you're not, you better start thinking about, all right, well, I need to get at least 12 applications out there, and I need to start thinking about these different sites. Best of luck to you, and I know it's a scrum, but hey, 3 hours, and you're done. Hey, thanks for listening to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast. And if you're interested in learning more about the interview process, go over to Amazon.com where you can check out 100 strong residency interview questions, answers, and rationales in print book, ebook, and audiobook.